Hi there, this is our lesson 141. In this class I will show you the pretérito pluscuamperfecto del indicativo, or simply pretérito pluscuamperfecto. This is the name of this conjugation tense in Spanish, and although the long name is quite intimidating, nevertheless the English language has this same tense. For example, I had gone, okay? I had eaten. This would be the pretérito pluscuamperfecto del indicativo, okay? So let's, before we get into the topic, let's see all the different tenses of the modo indicativo, okay? And although we are not actually seeing them in the same order that I have written them here, okay? But we will see them all in due time. You will learn how to conjugate all the regular verbs in Spanish into all the 22 tenses that we have in Spanish, okay? So let's begin with the first group of verbs in Spanish. This is the verbs that end in AR, right? Verbs of the group that end in AR. We'll choose as an example the verb hablar, or to speak. One example of pretérito pluscuamperfecto is yo había hablado. This means I had spoken. Another example, a bit more complex, is cuando llegué a casa, él ya había hablado con todos. Cuando llegué a casa, él ya había hablado con todos. This means when I arrived home, he had already spoken with everybody or to everybody, okay? So here, had spoken is pretérito pluscuamperfecto, or había hablado, right? Already is corresponds to the word ya, the y and the a. This means already in Spanish, right? And we can omit this word if we want. It doesn't change the meaning. Okay, let's start. Oh, and we are using the auxiliary verb haber. Same as in English, we use the verb to have, right? When we say I had spoken, in Spanish we use the verb haber. And the same as in English, what changes from conjugating for one person a subject pronoun to another is the auxiliary verb. And the verb to speak or hablar remains the same for all the persons, all the different persons. You can see here, yo había hablado, tú habías hablado, él había hablado, nosotros habíamos hablado, vosotros habíais hablado, ustedes habían hablado, ellos habían hablado. So remember, vosotros and ustedes are synonyms, and usted means you, but it is the formal way of addressing somebody we are talking to, okay? And Spanish is a formal language, so we address somebody as usted when it is somebody much older than us or somebody with certain status that requires us to keep a respectful distance, or also when we are talking to somebody we do not know or we are unacquainted with, okay? Somebody in the street, or we go out shopping, or a customer, etc. Okay? Let's continue with the second group of Spanish verbs, the verbs that end in ER. We choose verb comer as an example to conjugate. Comer means to eat. Example, yo había comido. I had eaten. Cuando llegué a casa, él ya había comido. When I arrived home, he had already eaten. Here, had eaten is pretérito pluscuamperfecto. In Spanish, it is había comido. We are still using the auxiliary verb haber. So we say, yo había comido. I had eaten. Tú habías comido. You had eaten. Él había comido, or ella había comido, for she had eaten, or usted había comido, for you had eaten, you, formal you. Nosotros habíamos comido, we had eaten. Vosotros habíais comido, you had eaten, you plural. Ustedes habían comido, you had eaten, you plural. And ellos habían comido, they had eaten. So now let's finish with the third and last classification of Spanish verbs. This is the verbs that end in IR or ir. Example, this is a regular verb of this third group, the verb vivir. Vivir means to live. Example, yo había vivido. I had lived. Él había vivido 10 años en esa casa. This means he had lived 10 years in that house, or for 10 years in that house, okay? Había vivido or had lived would be the pretérito pluscuamperfecto. So you can see here when it is that we use the pretérito pluscuamperfecto, okay? If you think of the English tense, I had lived, you can see when it applies, when we have to use the pretérito pluscuamperfecto. We are still using verb haber as auxiliary verb or verbo auxiliar. Yo había vivido. I had lived. Tú habías vivido. You had lived. Él or ella or usted había vivido. For he or she or you had lived. Nosotros habíamos vivido. We had lived. Vosotros habíais vivido. You had lived. Plural you. Ustedes habían vivido. You had lived. Again, the plural you. And ellos habían vivido. They had lived. So you can see here how only the auxiliary verb changes, right? It's the only one that is conjugated for every single subject pronoun, okay? And the verb vivir, or whatever verb we want to conjugate, remains the same, right? Vivido, 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 always. Only see how the ending for the second and third groups is ido, right? I-D-O or I-D-O. And for the first group, it is ado, A-D-O or A-D-O, okay? So the ending changes whether it is the first group or second and third groups of verbs.